才试一下，随便。好，那还是要跟你说明一下，关于这个细化的方向哈，我们已经有一个初步的都可以。那这个活动的代言人的部分，无所谓啦，跟我讲什么都不会听我。那我们把活动代言人的头换成你的头喽。您决定，你开心就好，怎样都可以。好，是戏吧，白痴！是怎样？太 emo 了吧？对啊，他就是这样啊。无论我跟他说什么，他都怎么样都行，怎么样都可以。可是又一脸屎样，真的看着就觉得很气。我不知道哪里惹到他。我觉得你主管的那个怨恨很深沉。对，我对他的怨恨就像刻在心底的名字一样。他的名字就是。但是我觉得当主管其实也不是很容易吧？是吗？要不然你心里觉得理想主管是什么样子？我理想主管的样子呢，大概就是身高158公分，体重10公斤，那最好别人迟到都不会骂他。根本就是你迟到上面不能骂你吧？而且你这个条件听起来好像怪怪的。那就是最好还是黑色的短头发。是你吗？怎么样？我不能当主管吗？也不是不行啊，只是你这个条件听起来跟好主管无关啊。那不然再加一个好了，讨厌公车换车道。不是这个意思。好主管应该是他的工作能力或者是人格特质啊，像是可能很有领导能力啊，然后对事情很有独到见解啊，或者是可以同理倾听下属。那 OK 啊，我都有啊。你有吗？我有啊，有啊。你说这些我都有啊。哦，是啊。有。很生气啊？不是很明确啊。不然我们再演练一下。说来就来。请进。副总裁好。柴呀。来，坐。好。最近有这个提案想请你才试一下。你说。好，那关于这个提案哈，我已经有一个初步的。无聊吗？不会，你说，我都有在听。刚开始而已。关于这个细化的方向哈，已经有一个初步的雏形了。压力。晚安，副总裁。我一直都在说啊。关于这个提案的活动代言人哈，我们已经想好了。根本还没讲。怎么啦？你说我都有在听。那活动代言人的部分哈，我们讨论了很久，想说，不是，把活动代言人的头换成你的头怎么样啊？这提案不错啊，我都有在听啊。根本没人听啊，白痴啊！说什么？你根本就没在听啊！我有啊，我有在听啊。那我说的提案是什么？你说的提案就是那个总统报告国情的常态化。太远了吧？太远啦！是。根本不适合当主管。我怎么会不适合？你甚至不是不适合当主管，你甚至是个问题员工我当员工超认真的，我都超准时上班的耶。表定几点上班？我表定10点上班。那你几点到班？我10点到班。OK， 蛮准时。是不是很准时？我还可以顺便去夜市买个吊灯排骨来喝刚刚好。晚上10点，迟到一整天还要去吗？可是我还是要上啊，我该上的时数啊。我可是早上7点才下班公司有同意你这样擅自开班的。可是我还是要做好我该做的事情啊。我是说公司的椅子睡起来真不舒服。那你就是去吃宵夜睡觉啦。哪有睡觉？我也是有认真做提案。什么提案？就是那个产业园区的规划案嘛。我可是认真找资料的哦。那很不错。是不是 来签错公司哎。等一下，你这个段子会放在网上，主管可能会看到。我主管其实还是很好，我主管真的很认真啊，能力很好，很快乐。他会念我都是因为我好，现在啦，他会理我吗？谁鸟你啊？谁鸟我啊？主管他可真的是好，让人欣赏。现在是火光充满。我真的很需要这份工作。没有啦，哎，其实我根本没有工作啦。刚那些都是掰的，掰的没主管啊。小姐可能真的要没有。都是我问题啊，都是我问题啊，就是你啊。没有啦，我应该都排不了。
我们是达康的康，大家好。我其实是一个非常喜欢看电影的人。
我知道。
对，我花了很多时间在看电影。
是。
我甚至为了这个呢，办了一张那种花旗的信用卡。
他真花旗的吗？
对，花旗信用卡。
业配了，又在业配了。
没有业配，
又在业配了。
我很久之前就办了，真的，就为了平日的时候在微秀看电影6折。
花旗6折，记得了吗？
好，不用
6折，
没有收人家钱，不用业配这么用力，好不好？
是。
我的意思是说，我看很多电影，所以各种类型的电影基本上我都有涉猎。
各种类型。来，恐怖片
看，超喜欢。
我还看很多种类型的。
你只问了一种而已嘛？
因为我不看恐怖片的。
对，他不看恐怖片，这我知道。
本人已经够恐怖了。
是因为这原因吗？当然是真的。
假的啦，
真的哦。
假的，
真的吧？
假的吧？
你看到没有？
恐怖假的吧？没有假的，假的吧？假的吧？
好，冷静一下，我们离开恐怖片的范畴了。
离开。
我意思是说那种史诗动作片啊，科幻片啊，
科幻片不错，
家庭片啊，那种基本上都是我手背范围。
你真的看很多
几乎都看。
你看这么多的话，会不会有什么后遗症啊？
后遗症。你说是花很多电影票钱？痔疮啊？才不是，好不好？才没有痔疮这种后遗症呢。我没有做电影看电影没有做那么久啊。
所以不是看电影造成的。
不是，我还没有痔疮，好不好？什么叫诓我啊？
不是啊，你现在一直站着，不就是因为坐下？
不是啦，演出的关系啊，才不因为痔疮干嘛？
我说帮你治疗一下。
那治打嗝啦，这样可以治好痔疮的话，医生都要失业了，好吗？
我帮你跟大家分享一下怎么治疗的，好不好？
没有，
分享一下。
我没有痔疮，好不好？如果你说看电影有什么后遗症，的确有一项，
有是不是？
对，就是你电影看多了，其实很容易猜到剧情的那个走向和结尾。有点影响乐趣啊。
太有经验了，这个样子。
是。
那你预告片也猜得到吧？
预告片
啊，就电影看到前面不是会播很多，
对，我知道什么是预告片，好不好？
知道。
你的意思说看预告片的时候容易猜到剧情的走向结尾？
对啊，有可能啊。好比如说最近有一个很红的那个动画预告，你猜得到吗？
之前那个《鬼灭之刃》
微秀宝宝，
才不是，好不好？那不是预告片好吗？那叫你关手机而已。
猜到了，
才没有猜到啊！
猜到了，
没有，好不好？那东西连讲话都没讲话，只被这就预告片啊！对，那个金刚大战那个哥吉拉，对，这才是预告片。
金刚，你是说其他的片种啊？
对。
其他片子你猜得到？
几乎都猜得到。
几乎猜得到啊。好，比如说2021春节强档唯一选择。
要我猜是不是？好，
康元生
猜不到啊。这样猜，内容都没有，我要猜个屁呀！
内容啊，2021劳动节唯一选择。
劳动节有这档期？
有啊，做工的人
啊，对，做工的人是电视影集，去年就播完了。
不太一样，就电影特别版。
不一样，
对，特别限定。
钉钉子，工地丈量，指挥工程车，就做工的人没错。档期为什么会有档期啊？不，做工人没有档期。对，做工人没有档期吧？
做庙工的人。
跟做工人差一个字差超多了，好不好？为什么做庙工人会有这个？
杀小人不是都要钉在墙壁上？
钉子杀小人呐，是在诅咒人家是不是啊？这个呢？
黑色五芒星，大家看出来了？
画魔法阵是不是啊？宗教不对吧？还好嘞。 那这个呢？这个呢？
哦，这个是那个，
知道，该不会是帮人家驱邪吧？抓那丢高人拿桃木剑这样出去，
没有，就是附件而已，
附件，一点关系都没有了吧？
没有，庙公他有网球肘嘛，他那个
职业病是不是？
那个。
两部完全不同片的好吗？
对，所以清明年假唯一选择好像比较适合，
是适合，对吧？是适合，但是我完全猜不到，
太难了，
不是太难，是你太奇怪了。
哦，是哦，
不然再出一题嘛。
今年万圣节你最不敢面对的恐惧？
万圣节强打，
他们都以为逃得掉，但其实
开头很惊悚。电锯啊，我知道这种虐杀片，
没错，是不敢拔智齿的人，
那才不是虐杀片，谁拿电锯拔智齿？德州电锯杀人魔吧，
泸州电锯牙医师，
歪掉了，完全歪掉，谁猜得到啦？
猜不到吗？
猜不到啦。
我们再一个，今年中元节，最佳选择，
恐怖片里面经典的追逐镜头，
哇，请猜，
这个很清楚了。恐怖片跟灵异有关的
啊，没错，都市传说，跑步机上下不来的人，
才是恐怖片，好不好？那只是那个人蠢而已，好吗？而且很害怕回头看什么？
他的健身教练在看他。
健身教练有多可怕？你刚才这样他在跑步机上面啊，有没有奇怪啦？
今年中原普渡吃很多嘛你？
我是鬼的设定啊！
旺旺仙贝那种垃圾食物不能吃啊！
报告啊！剧情是这样吗？
猜到了耶！
完全没有猜到。
有啊，恐怖灵异你都猜到了，
跟我想象完全不一样。
不一样吗？
不一样。
不然轻松一点。
轻松一点哈。
今年圣诞节就等这一部。
家庭片。
欢迎合家观赏。
合家观赏的。一样吧。恐怖片跑步吧。
Jingle bell, jingle bell，
唱个圣诞歌啊，我比较轻。
服务员的感觉的能力。
西六码头这个5层猪肠汤非常有名，外面就排一堆人。先给大家看一下菜单。我们终于坐进来啊！我超期待这一个，因为这一间是5层的猪肠汤哦。我第一次吃到这种，哇，真的超多层的，你看。好，先来试试看。
东西超神奇的，
真的。
对，它完全没有腥味哦，然后很鲜。所有你在猪肠里面吃过的口感，什么脆啊、嫩啊，然后软软的有油脂啊，各种，它都在里面了。
而且我跟你讲，它其实口感上面蛮脆、蛮 Q 的。
对，
当你咬下去的时候，它其实不是那么容易马上就断了，可是断了之后，它里面会啪啦啪啦的断掉，这样。
真的就是那一些我刚刚讲的，就是什么脆啊，然后反正多种口感都在里面了。
我自己觉得非常好吃，因为它咬断了之后，它里面还有那个油脂的那个味道。对，跟我们平常吃到的大肠，
可是它那个油脂味是非常干净的，就是完全你不会感觉到任何什么肠子味啊、腥味的，
完全没有那种猪腥味这样。很好吃。来喝一个这个汤给大家看。
然后汤也是非常的接触，就是还蛮浓郁的那个蛋黄，那你喝起来是，油脂感也是还蛮重的，可是是清爽的那种，就好喝的油这样子。
对，它其实有那个猪肠的那种油味，可是不是那种腥味哦。对，其实我觉得有时候吃猪肠会有那种不知道怎么讲奶香的味道。
其实就是油脂，但是是新鲜的，没有腥味的那种。
对，很好喝，然后那个甜感不是那种味精甜的。
对，然后我觉得它的调味啊，也算是重口味的人会喜欢的。它不是很咸，但也不是说清淡到那种重口味的吃会觉得没味道的程度。
对，然后它里面放的姜丝还蛮多的，它不腥，但是就是因为它本身就
很杰出的一碗啊。如果说你在外面吹冷冷的风，突然进来喝一碗，真的是超幸福的。
对，而且它这整个就是比平常的都还要出一个这样子，我很推荐，因为没有吃过这么有趣的这样子。 点了一个红烧肉啊，然后我刚刚吃了一下，也跟我们平常外面不一样。我们外面红烧肉都是它那个皮外皮是炸过的那一种，它不是，它看起来是红烧，可是它其实没有炸过。然后猪肉部分非常的柔软，
看起来嫩嫩的。
它的这边的猪都完全没有腥味，很特别，对不对？很好吃，对不对？跟你想象中的不一样，真的。我跟大家形容一下，它蛮像那种拉面里面的叉烧肉的感觉，而且它的酱很好吃，它甜甜的这样子。我们刚刚也拿过猪肠，然后蘸它，很好吃。
一般的那个红烧肉啊，它中间的肉就是比较结实一点，那它就是比较，它好像有一点点那种，那叫什么？有一个煮法。
想不起来，对，你平常不煮东西。
你先等一下。我要说的是酥肥啦，有点像酥肥，但它没有像它那么的软，那么的深。
对，但它是真的蛮柔软的。其实我觉得就像是很好吃的那种就是拉面里面的叉烧肉，然后外面却是包的那个红糟的那种调味，这样子很特别，很好吃。我会必点这一个。我们还点了一个，就是
3层肉。
对对对，
主要是看到就是别桌客人点，然后觉得哇，这个3层肉看起来太好吃了。
对对对。
不然我平常是不会去点3层肉的。
它吃起来还蛮甜的，然后一样是没有腥味的。
它没有那个油感，因为我点3层肉最怕就是吃到它那个肥的地方啊，会觉得恶心有油感，可是完全没有。你看它这个皮的颜色就知道不太一样，就是很晶莹剔透，它的毛也处理得蛮干净的。
然后重点是它的肉都还算柔软型的。对，我觉得这边真的是它的小菜目前我们给到的都还蛮棒的。
你吃到皮啊，吃到肥的地方啊，一点你觉得那种恶心都没有，
一点点都没有。然后这一碗叫做半碗卤肉饭，
对，
它里面就是给你配一下，然后有一点滋味这样子，10块钱而已。对啊，就是它还蛮人性化的。
我觉得蛮正中我们下怀，就是有时候我们就是想要配一下东西，但是又不想要吃太多淀粉。
然后这样就可以吃一下，就是一点卤肉味，让它卤肉饭吃太好吃。我觉得这边特别适合早餐，它这个就是让你早餐然后小吃一下，然后吃一点点这个东西的时候，有一点味就好，不要太重口味，这样子温柔唤醒你的早上。
对，然后我吃到里面就是跟刚刚前面的一贯的那种风格一样，它的猪肉非常的棒。你吃到肥的地方完全都不会有腥味，不会腻。然后我刚刚有吃到一块是猪皮的部分，很 Q，这是我们比较少在卤肉饭会吃到的口感。然后就跟刚刚讲的一样，它的咸味不会太重，因为它不需要去压它的腥味。对，
你基本上要把它变成一碗白饭，然后帮你配了一些卤肉这样，然后提升那个香气这样子。还不错这整个东西我整个超喜欢。如果我早上然后住附近的话，我很常会出现在这里。
如果我可以只吃一间的话，我也想要把它的小菜都点一轮。
跟他一下菜单给大家看吗？太厉害！我们原本要吃另外一间，
对，
然后后来昨天刚好我观众跟我们说，这一间才是内行，所以我们就来吃这一间了。
然后我们站在那边的时候就说，这怎么闻就觉得很对劲。
对，有
一点重要性。
对，很香。然后看它在冒烟的时候，我就有一定来对了。
就是我们刚刚要拍那个老板娘的那个餐嘛，然后 他说等一下，我先把油捞起来再拍。可是那个汤本来就已经超轻了，然后我们每次在拍的几种状况，不是说你不要拍到我，不然就是说等一下我先整理一下我的鱼油。
internationally more in domestic markets. How is that influencing the way you're
well, the interesting thing, His Excellency made a great point, which is the percentage allocation of capital to domestic versus international is going higher for domestic. However, because of the extraordinary growth in the PIF, the actual amount of capital in international is going up as well. And so there's an extraordinary amount of capital here looking for the best opportunities both domestically and internationally.
Yeah.
So we're excited about that relationship.
Let's talk about the macro. I've had several conversations here with some leading industry makers, newsmakers from around the world, industry leaders, and I get the sense that people are feeling okay about the outlook for the U.S. economy, but a little bit more concerned about Europe. Does that tie up with your own view as well?
Look, I think that certainly the U.S. economy, I mean, you just were chatting about, everything is at record highs, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even equal weighted versus the S&P, I mean, they're all up substantially. The rise in rates is indicative of people's comfort in the economy. The data since the Fed cut has been positive. There's certainly concerns about potential increased inflation, concerns about the U.S. deficit, but the U.S. economy, the employment data, the inflation data, has all been quite positive, and so that's why the markets continue to do so well. Europe is a little bit more concerning just because there's not the growth that we see across in the U.S., and so you see rates coming down there, you see some concerns, and then to the extent there's changes from the election and that there might be less support in Europe because of the America First if Trump is the winner, then I think there's also issues there.
Can I just ask you, given your cautiousness about Europe, do you see a distress cycle picking up there?
Well, it's interesting you asked that question because we actually do see more, I wouldn't say distressed, I just see more special situations opportunities. We've been on the ground in London with the team since 2005. I've actually, in my firm, has been an active investor. I've been doing this now for 37 years, and we were one of the earliest distressed investors in Europe back in the early 90s. And so, yes, we see more opportunity. The banking system is different. The capital markets are different. The economy is different. The reliance on China is different. So I think there's a lot of potential opportunity in European special situations and perhaps distress.
Let's talk about private credit,
Sure.
which has seen a massive amount of interest just in the last couple of years or so. Let me just ask you, given, you just mentioned that you typically would look at distressed markets, obviously private credit, big theme now. Do you feel as though private credit is somewhat eating into the distressed market?
So we have to just step back for a second. So first of all, we've been in the leverage finance, high yield, liquid credit, distressed credit, private credit, structured credit, U.S., Europe for 37 years. Hundreds of billions of dollars of investments. And the markets, the private credit market is really replacing, in many respects, for new transactions, what used to go to the syndicated market. There was a great slide on Bloomberg a month or so ago that talked about, there's been so much commentary about the banks are back. And they're taking away share from the private credit market. The private credit golden era is over, but that's just not true. The banks are back as syndicators. So there's a slide on Bloomberg that $900 billion of new bank deals this year. Of that $900 billion, $600 billion was repricing, $200 billion refinancing, and only $100 billion new deals. 85% of new deals, new private equity transactions, get done in the private credit market. And so that's where the opportunity is. And in the distressed market, interestingly, the distressed market today, given the macro backdrop and given the liquidity in the markets, is relatively modest. However, because there's still a lot of debt that needs to get refinanced, the LME, the liability management exercise, is kind of the next leg of distress, which is really the convergence of private credit and distress.
It just, I don't know, like in some ways it feels a bit reminiscent of those days around 2005, 2006. There's a lot of hype around this. There's a lot of competition. Spreads are extremely tight. Publicly traded spreads are extremely tight. These spreads that you're getting on private credit have started to compress as well. Are you getting adequately compensated for the risk that you're underwriting?
So you are absolutely correct that in the liquid credit market, spreads are not quite at 2007 levels yet, but we're at 285 basis points for the high yield market, 175 for double B credit. However, most of your show is about the peaking equity markets and the macro backdrop. And so it's not a shocker that if there's a benign economic environment, that spreads would be narrow. Now, to your point of our private credit spreads adequate, I would put forward that 150 private credit, senior direct lending, we're getting in the neighborhood of 500 basis points of credit spread. That's 150 plus over the comparable credit risk in the syndicated markets, 150 to 200. At 500 basis points of credit spread, you get double-digit returns, and that's why there's so much demand for private credit, and that's why we see so many investors in the region, so many investors around the world be interested in it.
that's a great place to leave it. Fascinating talking to you. That was the CEO of Oak Hill Advisors, Glenn August, here with me at the FIA conference in Riyadh. Thank you very much again for your time. Well, coming up, more from Saudi Arabia's FIA summit here in Riyadh. We'll be speaking to Atlas Merchant CEO Bob Diamond about his view on the U.S. economy. This is Bloomberg.
Morning, this is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. I'm Tom McKenzie in London. These are the stories that set your agenda.
Taking you from the U.S. market's close to the overnight session in Asia. We'll walk you through what you need to know to kickstart the European trading day. Live from our European headquarters, we bring you the day's top market-moving stories, unmatched expert analysis, and on-the-ground reporting from across the continent. Tune in every weekday at 6 a.m. London time, only on Bloomberg Television. Bloomberg covers the world with unmatched reach and resources. From more than 120 countries, the moment news breaks, 24 hours a day. Bloomberg, context changes everything. Get your fixed income fix. Watch Bloomberg Real Yield every Friday right here on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
Welcome back to Horizons Middle East and Africa. I'm Joanna Versace in Riyadh today. Well, the titans of finance gathering in Riyadh this week for Saudi Arabia's annual Davos-style summit were mostly upbeat on the prospects for the U.S. economy, but are concerned about more sluggish growth in Europe. Joining us now is Bob Diamond, the CEO of Atlas Merchant Capital and co-founder of Atlas Mar. Good to have you with us.
Good to be here.
How are some of the conversations you're having in Riyadh going?
Listen, this is I think it's the 8th year that they've had this conference, and from the very beginning, it's been, about the developments of the domestic economy, the GCC region, and investment abroad. And I think it continues to be that way. There's more discussion, I think, about opportunities here in the region for investors, and I think that's a little bit new in the discussion.
Yeah. What scope do you see for investments in the region? Where's the most excitement? Obviously, around here, there's been a lot of talk about AI and the push that Saudi Arabia, UAE are making in AI. I wonder if that's translating to investors as well.
For sure, and I think definitely the whole technology area is incredibly important in terms of investment here. As you know, we tend to specialize in financial services. Mm-hmm. Many of the banking institutions that are domestic or regional tend to have a very large percentage of government ownership. So for us, the opportunity to get in getting international investors to invest is it's an exciting opportunity. It's something we've been working on for a number of years.
How are you feeling about the financial services industry? In the U.S., the bank season kicked off, the earnings season kicked off. Results very, very strong, I've got to say. Do you think that momentum continues?
Well, we've always been focused on, particularly since 2008, the thesis for Atlas Merchant Capital has always been a lot of the great opportunities are going to be outside of deposit-taking institutions because of the higher capital levels and repercussions of the 2008 financial crisis.
Yeah.
But what we see today is kind of the opposite, which is with the strength of the large four banks and with the failure of SVB a couple of years ago, the opportunity for consolidation in regional and community banks, frankly, I think it's the #1 investment opportunity in the U.S. right now. I think that 4,500 regional and community banks, which provide a tremendous need, they solve a lot of problems for small, medium-sized businesses, for family-owned businesses, for wealthy families. But I think 4,500 is going to go through a period of restructuring and consolidation, where some of the stronger acquire some of the community banks, which in our mind are just too small to succeed, at a time when the technology investments are really quite substantive for smaller institutions, complying with the higher regulatory intrusion, really triggered by SVB and First Republic.
It's funny how you say the word intrusion, regulatory intrusion. That's kind of the wording, the feedback I've got, at least implicitly from my conversations with the bankers here from the U.S. Do you think the regulatory landscape will allow that consolidation to happen in coming years?
Yeah, I think it's one of the things when you look at this election. I think if it's a Republican candidate wins, I think the outlook for consolidation in the banking industry, for example, or consolidation in many industries, kind of a different approach or more positive approach toward regulation will come with it. Mm-hmm. On the other side, with the Democratic candidate, we probably have a little bit better outlook for international trade and for free trade.
Okay, interesting to know that. Can I just ask you about consolidation in Europe? I don't know how closely you've been looking at that market, but it's interesting to see that we're finally seeing some murmurs of cross-border with UniCredit taking a look at Commerzbank. Do you think that this is the start, perhaps, of more cross-border consolidation in European banks as well?
I do. Listen, it's been a really, really long period since 2008 where the U.S. banks have just completely outperformed European banks. Part of that was a very different regulatory approach to helping the banks repair their balance sheets. And we've seen, banks like Citi and B of A, who at the moment in 2008 were frankly insolvent. And today they're doing really, really well. Very strong operations, and I think we're just beginning to see that in Europe with banks like BNP Paribas, Santander, UBS, UniCredit, showing that kind of strength. As they get stronger, I think it augurs very, very well for cross-border consolidation, but there isn't one integrated banking union across Europe. There is one integrated currency. And I think the progress we're seeing toward the potential UniCredit acquisition of Commerzbank, in my mind, would be very positive for banking across Europe and for future opportunities in Europe. So I do think that this is an opportunity to kickstart something that won't be an avalanche, but I think over the next decade, we'll see a stronger cross-border banking.
Certainly, it's certainly time for Europe to do that. Just a quick word on Atlas Mara and your footprint in Africa, because it feels as though you've been scaling back your businesses a little bit there. Can you just give us an update?
Well, Atlas Merchant Capital is firm, and our focus has always been developed economies, U.S., UK, and Europe.
Okay, so just to round things up then, can I just ask where you think right now the #1 opportunity is going to be for growth markets?
So there's two things we're really focused on. I mentioned the consolidation and restructuring of the community of regional banks in the U.S., and I think it's a 2, 3, 4-year process, or I should say we do, and we're very focused, working on a number of things there right now. I think the second big opportunity for us is in credit. And, it's been a long time since 2008. We had a very long period of zero interest rates. I think the market has adjusted pretty well to going from 0 to 5 or 5.5%. But we're seeing more divergence in the lower levels of corporate credit, triple C's or that kind of level. The divergence between those that are still strong operators and those that are weaker is getting greater. And we think that there's significant opportunities in the lower end of corporate credit.
Okay, that's a good place to leave it. Bob Diamond, the CEO of Atlas Merchant Capital, thank you very much. Well, coming up, Nigeria's currency hits a record low as dollar liquidity plunges over 70%. We have the details next. This is Bloomberg.
The countdown is on. Everything you need to get the edge at the end of the market day.
Big tech earnings kick off later this afternoon.
Gilead is coming out right now. We have take two numbers. Back to the markets, right? Our bread and butter.
NVIDIA is one of the best stories of the tech space.
That actually matters a whole lot more.
It might shock some of your viewers.
You're watching The Close.
Get ahead of tomorrow's trading with The Close. Weekdays on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
Good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Welcome back to the opening trade.
This is Bloomberg Technology.
This is the Asia trade.
You're watching The Close. Welcome to Balance of Power.
This is Bloomberg. It's the world's second largest economy with a growing influence in global affairs. But geopolitical uncertainties, deflationary pressures, and questions about foreign investment linger. Bloomberg, the China Show, brings you the unmatched expertise you need to keep track of breaking news, in-depth market analysis, and the most influential newsmakers in and around China. Bloomberg, the China Show. Weekdays around the world, right here on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
Welcome back to Horizons Middle East and Africa. I'm Jemana Versace in Riyadh. Well, Nigeria's local currency has fallen to a record low after a steep drop in dollar liquidity in the foreign exchange market. Africa's largest crude producer has struggled to stabilize its currency since it was allowed to trade freely against the dollar in June last year. Let's bring in Bloomberg's Andiro Ganga, who joins us from Kigali. Andiro, what factors are impacting the currency?
Thank you, Jumana. So a couple of things to consider here. One, dollar liquidity has been up and down in the second quarter of the year. So this 72% drop doesn't come as a surprise. Investors have been sitting on the fence because the policy environment in Nigeria is very unpredictable. And we even have the IMF advising the central bank to stabilize their policy. We've seen in the recent couple of months, there have been hikes and cuts in equal measure. If we also zoom in on the national currency, it's quite under some form of demand pressures because this is a currency, according to the IMF, that is the cheapest it has ever been in 20 years. It's one of the world's worst performing currencies year to date, having lost nearly 70% of its value to the dollar. And if you look at day-to-day trading, there's significant gaps there, which is further eroding confidence in this currency. And if we go back to May, when the president came into office in 2023, he introduced a raft of reforms that were to encourage foreign direct investment in the country. That has not happened. It's been very limited. Money has only come from the World Bank. There's no IMF program to guarantee investors' capital outflows. And the economy is grappling with a widening budget deficit, high borrowing, and there's no clear-cut path towards which they're going to raise revenue. So these are some of the factors that are leading to that pressure that we're seeing.
And Andiro, how is the Nigerian economy reacting to the fact that the currency is falling so much?
These changes have been very hard to absorb, Jumana. If we just go back to the end of June when results of companies were released, we saw top 6 Nigerian companies recording losses of $385 million. Airtel recorded the biggest losses. Then you have Dangote Sugar saying that once they adjusted their exchange rate, they lost 68.7 billion naira. We had Cadbury increasing their prices and MTN reporting a drop in their profits. If you also look at external loans, they're reflecting limited confidence in the naira because companies are now beginning to pay off their dollar debt. We had Nigerian breweries in September say they're going to pay off their $197 million debt. And also EcoBank Nigeria saying they're going to convert their $200 million debt into nairas to cushion themselves against further volatility. And although the IFC will be injecting about $1 billion into the Nigerian economy to go into loans for small businesses in terms of local currency, more interventions are needed. The government will need probably to run run down its reserves to buffer the currency. They could raise a Eurobond towards the end of the year, early next year, and also ramp up oil production to hit budget projections of 1.7 million barrels a day from the current 1.3.
Bloomberg's Andira Ganga, thank you so much for bringing us that overview. Okay, a quick look at equity futures before we head out for the first hour of Horizon. So things are leaning towards the green. This as the Nasdaq makes another record high, S&P very close to record highs as well. European indices not doing as well. However, we've got these stocks at 50 futures looking like it's going to open up in the red, down about 0.4% as that market digests as well some of the other news hitting. But that was it for Horizon's Middle East and Africa first hour. I'm Jumana Brusetti in Riyadh. Stay with us for the second hour that is coming up in just a few moments.
We see an incredible amount of potential benefit from this technology, right? Something that Dario and I talk about a lot, together with the company, with our co-founders, is just the potential for this technology to transform sectors like, healthcare, right? Or even science. I think some customers that have worked with us, Pfizer, the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, right? The type of work that they're doing is truly amazing, and we're proud to be able to support businesses like that. I also think we have felt very strongly that there are some lessons to be learned from kind of prior, technological waves or innovation. And this is not that, we're so incredibly prescient. We've just had, several decades now of time to kind of look back on things like social media and say, wow, there was a lot of good that came out of this, but there were also a lot of harms that were kind of caused by this technology. Whether or not you could have anticipated those in advance, hard to say. But I think we are trying to be the most responsible actors that we can be, and think about what are the potential externalities that could be caused kind of accidentally by this tech. And we really try and take a very broad approach to how we think about that. Of course, we don't have all the answers. We try to be humble, but we've tried very, very hard to sort of think about what are the areas where something kind of could go wrong.
Bloomberg Surveillance covers the latest in global markets and the political events that influence your world. Join Jonathan Farrell, Lisa Abramowitz, and Anne-Marie Hordern only on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute business news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Anne-Marie Hordern in Ukraine, and this is Bloomberg.
Good morning. This is Horizon's Middle East and Africa, our top stories this morning. It is day 2 of Saudi Arabia's Future Investment Initiative, where global finance CEOs are closely watching for global growth, the upcoming U.S. elections, as well as AI. We bring you an extensive lineup of speakers today. Lebanon's Hezbollah appoints its new chief. The militant group says Naim Qassem will replace long-standing leader Hassan Nasrallah, who was assassinated last month. And Kamala Harris addresses a crowd in Washington, while Donald Trump is in Pennsylvania seeking an election edge a week out from the vote. Well, good morning. morning, everybody. It's just on 9 a.m. across the Emirates. It is 8 a.m. in Saudi Arabia. I'm Jumana Versace in Riyadh.
And I'm Jennifer Zabasaja in Johannesburg, where it has just gone at 7 a.m. Welcome to the second hour of Horizons Middle East and Africa.
Jen, it's great to have you with me. All right, let us take a quick look at how markets are faring, building on from the discussions that we had in the first hour. And of course, a lot of earnings have been hitting this week. We have been speaking about the distinctive price action between Alphabet on one side after hours. The stock is trading up versus AMD. The stock is trading much lower, down 7% after they missed on sales guidance. So that came as a bit of a disappointment to the market. That being said, NASDAQ making all-time highs and today leaning towards the green as well, up about 0.1%. Gold at the all-time highs once more. I can't even keep track of how many record highs the gold market has made this year, but here we are sitting just shy of 2,800, and 10-year yield sitting at 4.25 now. So flattish on the day, but still the worst month for U.S. yields that we've seen in the last 2 years. So notable price action and a lot of upward pressure being exerted on 10-year yields here. Switching over and just taking a look at our terminal chart today, and this just really encapsulates how much of the price action in S&P has been on the back of those stocks, those magnificent 7 stocks. They've been driving the S&P index higher, and you can see that the equal weight S&P, that is giving all of the stocks in the S&P equal weight, has been lagging. That tells you that the market cap plays, i.e. the magnificent 7, which have the largest market cap, have been pushing the index higher. So just a noteworthy point as we talk about the earnings season. Let's also check in on how markets in Asia are faring. April Hong is in our Singapore studio standing by. April, just give us an overview of how some of these Asian markets are trading this morning.
Yeah, Jumana, we're seeing Japanese stocks gaining ground for a third day, helped along by the chip and bang names, helped along as well by relative yen weakness. You think about the BOJ decision, but more importantly, the guidance from Governor Ueda tomorrow. Expectations are low that we will see some clear outline or hints of whether we'll see a December or January hike, given the election uncertainty surrounding Japan, but also the US. So that is something that I think is helping some Japanese stock performance along. But take a look at what we're seeing on Chinese equities, a lot lower today. It is about stimulus disappointment, but also how earnings have come through so far, more than halfway through reporting on the CSI 300, and it hasn't looked good. This is what we're seeing in Asia. Jumana.
Excellent. April, thank you so much for the overview. Again, another mixed bag for Asian markets. All right, well, here in Riyadh, I've got another guest with me right now. It's Antoine Flammarion, the Tikao Capital co-founder. Great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, as I understand it, you and I were just speaking a little bit off record, not off record, I'd say, not live, but you were telling me about the substantial presence that Tikao has over here in the region, specifically in Saudi Arabia. So tell us more about that.
Yes, correct. Thank you. And I think, for us, we embraced the Kingdom vision and the Vision 2030, and we decided to have a portfolio company be present in Riyadh. So we have various projects in Riyadh. For instance, we are very involved in the Green Riyadh, planting over 10 million trees through our portfolio company. We have a manufacturing company producing aerospace piece in Jeddah. So for us, and especially for everybody in private market, you need to be local. You need to be global, but when it comes to private market, manufacturing, production, servicing, it's local. So we decided to be local.
We're seeing that opportunity right now in the kingdom.
Yeah, because there is a strong growth in the region. There is no doubt. The world is becoming more and more complex, bifurcated, and I think GCC and especially the kingdom will continue to grow.
Yeah. Well, your portfolio is, I think, 40% private credit. I was just speaking to Oak Hill, as CEO, earlier on in the show, also very positive about the outlook for private credit. Are you concerned at all that interest rates are starting to come lower, that there's a lot of competition in this space? It's going to take away at some of the opportunities there?
Three answers. First of all, I mean, the disintermediation will keep going. There is no doubt that. So that means we need more and more private credit firms to finance energy transition, cybersecurity, green agriculture. I mean, there is more and more projects that needs financing. So the future of private credit will continue to be, growing, and is super appealing. Banks have been retrenching, but they are still there. Standard Chartered published their result this morning. The Q3 is just amazing. So that tells you that banks are still there, but there is still room for private credit. But you have to be cautious because the more private credit is increasing, the more defaults you will get. And you mentioned interest rate. There is no doubt that short-term interest rate will decline because central banks are more and more active. But 10 years US for 25 yesterday. So that tells you that long-term interest rate will remain high, and as a consequence, companies will suffer. So that means that you'll see defaults in the private credit, so you have to be cautious. And that's why we decided at Tikehau to have our skin in the game. We are the largest investor in our fund, so we manage third-party money, but also our money. So private credit, no doubt, will continue to grow, but be cautious overall. And people have been overexcited and super excited with private credit.
Banks also are getting super excited and are leaning into fundraising for private credit as well. Do you see them as the disruptor or the disruptee in the private credit?
I may say, from my point of view, and maybe it's I'm too young, but it's very surprising. What's the business of a bank? The bank is lending money, okay? And if you feed your competition, because you help them fundraising with your private bank and asset management, and or you create joint venture. We saw a lot of joint venture between alternative private credit firm and banks. So I'm a little bit surprised, but the trend keep going. Apollo just announced a big with Citibank joint venture, and it's probably good for them.
Yeah. Do you see the scope for further regulation hitting that space though? Because it's still largely unregulated. Could that be one potential headwind?
So after 2008, regulator changed the rules mainly for banks, but we see more and more rules coming from asset management as a whole. So now in the US, you have a lot of discussion about asset manager owning bank share, and you see that coming as well for private credit. For instance, for CLOs, the regulation is different. You need to have, capital invested, your capital invested. So there is no doubt that there will be more regulation for alternative asset manager and private credits more specifically.
Well, talking specifically about Tikehau, end of September, you reported that your AUM increased by 13%. I'm very curious to hear which area of the business, whether it's private debt, whether it's real assets or the private equity, which part of the business has been performing the best?
I mean, we keep raising money all around the globe. 15 billion, a third of our money is coming from private investor and wealthy investor. So that's a good trend and we'll keep going. And then when it comes to sector, we've been raising a lot of money for energy transition, private equity, direct lending, and cybersecurity as well. So we've got specific vertical like energy transition, but also private credit will continue to enjoy strong.
I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Oak Hill, which is just tying it back to the macro. I get a sense that people feel okay about the prospects for the U.S. economy, but there are some warning signs in Europe. I mean, you look at the likes of Germany, it's not really growing. The economy is growing at 0%. Real issues in the manufacturing sector, automakers coming along with pressure. What do you think that bodes for the credit distress market?
It's fairly relevant. As I said, the world is becoming more and more complex, and Europe is going to be probably more bumpy because you mentioned Germany, but not only. We've got a lot of different situations. But at the end of the day, when you invest, you need to be a little bit contrarian. And when it's become a little bit bumpy, you've got tons of opportunities. And I think we build our firm like that. And if we decide that we've got offices all around Europe, if we decide that Europe is not good, we have offices in the US, we have 4 offices in Asia, and we have offices here, so we can decide to shift, the place we invest. But I think it's going to be complex, it's going to be bumpy, but that leads to tons of opportunity. That's our view to approach things.
Yes, said like a true trader. Antoine Ferragnon, thank you so much. That's the Tikehau Capital co-founder. Now switching over to geopolitical news, Hezbollah says Naim Qassem will become its new leader after long-standing chief Hassan Nasrallah was assassinated about a month ago. The Lebanon-based militant group's main decision-making body announced the move online. Qassem has been deputy leader since 1981 and wasn't seen as the obvious successor. Now still ahead, more from Saudi Arabia's FII summit here in Riyadh. We'll be speaking to Rishi Kapoor, the vice chairman and CIO of Investcorp Holdings. This is Bloomberg.
shopping season is here.
I know it's like your Super Bowl,
I
right?
can't wait. It's like opening presents in the morning.
All right, it will be exciting.
Nobody covers earnings like Bloomberg.
There is this real momentum from Wall Street.
We're basically deep in the European earnings season. Take a look at how we're faring when it comes to Asian markets.
I'm Professor Hannah Fry, mathematician and writer. In this series, I will meet the companies, people, and pioneers transforming the world.
It's like the Jetsons meets the Flintstones.
Whatever future you dream of, if it affects us, I will explore it. The future is coming.
It's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. We'll show you what's happening in ETFs like no one else. Bloomberg ETF IQ, Monday on Bloomberg.
Key investors, top executives, global innovators. Join me for in-depth conversations with the biggest newsmakers on the day's top stories. Insight with Haslinda Anand, only on Bloomberg.
Welcome back to Horizons Middle East and Africa. I'm Joanna Versace in Riyadh. Well, Investcorp counts some of the Middle East's wealthiest royals and business moguls amongst its backers. Last year, an investment vehicle started by the group raised more than $450 million in an Abu Dhabi initial public offering. Joining me now is Rishi Kapoor, Vice Chairman and Chief Investment Officer of Investcorp Holdings. Good to have you with us. How are some of your conversations going here at FIA?
Thus far?
Yeah.
I mean, look, we've been here for every edition. So this is our 8th edition, dating all the way back to 2017. And it's remarkable how, the event itself has evolved and come along and, taken a real firm hold on the global event calendar, particularly as it relates to a couple of facets. One is the region. I think it's one of the premier events that is focusing predominantly on investment within the region, in addition to the traditional spot that this geographical region occupies in terms of being an exporter of capital. And the second is it's very heavily focused on investment, right, and financial services. So what we've sensed this time around in particular is there is a clear acceptance of the fact that the GCC region in particular, specifically the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and UAE, are clearly emerging as attractive markets for deployment of actual capital, not just as a source of capital, but actual investment of capital. And Investcorp having, we are born in the region, right, 40 plus years ago.
Yeah.
Having been in this place for more than 4 decades, of course, we understand the market, but more importantly, we've been investing in the market for close to 2 decades now. So it's good to see that actually that, the seeds that were planted earlier on are now bearing fruit.
In what sectors are you seeing the biggest opportunities for growth right now?
Regionally? I mean, there are a few big themes that are playing out in the region, and they all feed into the sectors that naturally therefore emerge as being relatively more attractive. One is the whole focus on diversification of the economic landscape regionally, and that in turn means that there is a big blossoming of small and medium-sized businesses, which is frankly our DNA, our sweet spot, right? We've been investing in mid-sized businesses since forever. So business services, therefore, is a very attractive space. Technology-enabled business services, but also blue-collar business services, professional services, very attractive. Healthcare, another attractive space. Technology overall, IT services, cyber services, etc., very attractive. Transportation and logistics, given the regional location, the focus, particularly on transportation as well, I think is very attractive. And finally, soft services like education, etc., clearly very attractive too.
An Investcorp specific question. You announced a fund that was backed by CIC. I'm curious to hear how progress has been on that fund and whether any other new funding has come through for it as well.
So Jumana, actually that fund, the CIC-backed fund, is targeting predominantly investments in the region, and that is the perfect illustration of what I was referring to earlier, right? That investor interest globally
on investing in the region and reaping the rewards of the attractive economies that are developing as a consequence is very much evident, right? That fund is coming along great. We are targeting about $750 million for it.
Done already?
Oh yeah, we've got 3 deals inside the fund. All of them doing particularly well, and all of them in the same space. So consumer services, healthcare, business services.
Yeah.
And all of them also focused on the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the UAE.
So Sketchbook right now is around 50 billion AUM?
Just over 50,
yeah, just
53.
Over 50. So how are you going to get to 100 billion AUM?
Through hard work.
Yeah, of course. I wish I could get to 100 billion AUM through hard work.
No, but I think that, it's all about doubling down behind the business perimeter that we've now carefully constructed over the course of the last decade, which means that we are now in all of the relevant markets, US, Europe, Middle East, and Asia. We are in all of the relevant asset classes, private equity, credit, real assets, including real estate and infrastructure, and we have the right team going forward. And this is all about scaling up that business footprint in those markets, those asset classes, and with the investors we serve.
What do you see as the scope for potential further partnering up with some of the sovereign wealth funds of the region? I know Mubadal obviously is an investor, an investor, but
we've actually got a good history there, in terms of being good value-added partners to these largest institutions globally, whether they're sovereign wealth funds or the largest pension plans, whether it's our private equity business or our credit business or our real estate business. And those are mutually rewarding partnerships, right? Because they last generations, they're not just one transaction. And so, I think going forward, we would probably see more of those rather than fewer.
Yeah. Final question for you. I've got to ask, but how do you feel sentiment has changed around the geopolitical conflicts in the region?
Remarkably, the GCC region itself and its both its economic growth and its positioning as an attractive destination for investment capital has been relatively less affected, despite the overhang of geopolitical conflict and unrest in the region. Now, that is not something that you want to take for granted, because clearly, the one thing that investors hate is uncertainty, right? We're simply not good at underwriting uncertainty. We can do it to some extent, but not the bookends. So I would hope that we can find a solution, to some of this regional geopolitical conflict. But at the same time, I have to acknowledge that the GCC has been an oasis, frankly, in the middle of all this turmoil.
Kind of echoes the conversations that I've had with others in the region as well. Rishi, it was really great to chat to you.
Likewise.
Wonderful to have you here on the sidelines of FII. Rishi Kapoor, Vice Chairman and CIO of Investcorp Holdings. Well, coming up, the countdown to the U.S. elections is on as candidates from both sides of the aisle fire final shots at each other ahead of the November 5th vote. More details next. This is Bloomberg.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute technology news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Annabelle Drawlers in Taipei, and this is Bloomberg.
Virginia or other authorities.
Who face bigger challenges next?
What's going to keep winning World Cup? This is a thrill.
As the iconic picture.
We're at the intersections of Hollywood.
Asia is at the forefront of some of the world's biggest stories. I'm Sherrian in Tokyo.
And I'm Heidi Stroud-Watts here in Sydney, where the trading day begins. We're here in the centre of all the action to get you set up with the numbers, news and knowledge you need for the day ahead.
The demand is indeed
recovery. We've been waiting for this moment.
The opportunity of a century.
Join us on Bloomberg The Asia Trade. Weekdays only on Bloomberg TV. Context changes everything.
As we spend some time here on the broader presidential race.
Let's focus in on European politics.
Makes you wonder how politics might play out.
Welcome back to Horizons Middle East and Africa. I'm Jennifer Zabasaja in Johannesburg. Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris argued a second Donald Trump presidency would be steeped in chaos and division ahead of the U.S. election on November 5th.
America, we know what Donald Trump has in mind. More chaos, more division, and policies that help those at the very top and hurt everyone else. I offer a different path, and I ask for your vote.
Trump, meanwhile, fired back at his opposition, accusing the Democratic Party of pushing the nation into decline.
The problem is, if we had more of these idiots running our country, you won't have a big and best market anymore. Because we're a nation in decline. We're going to turn that around. So you're going to be so proud of this country.
All right, for more, news desk editor Jill Desis joins us now. Jill, just about 6 days away. Give us a sense of what kind of message Harris, let's start with Harris, is zeroing in on the final days of this campaign.
Sure, Jen. So what we're really seeing there out of Harris is this idea of kind of narrowing in on, this multi-pronged approach. First of all, it's painting Trump as, so she's called him in the past a fascist, dangerous for democracy, really kind of honing that message. But then she's also trying to pair that with this broader message about the economy that she's really trying to sell voters on. I mean, this is a campaign that for Harris, obviously, this incredibly condensed presidential campaign where she is trying to combine these two thoughts of trying to paint, she's saying she's good for economic policy in the country, doing that against the backdrop of high inflation, but again, at the same time, really sort of setting herself apart from Trump. I think that rally that you're seeing right there, this idea that she's hosted her big closing argument rally in the same location where, Donald Trump hosted a rally on January 6th really speaks volumes for that idea of really trying to set herself apart from her campaign opponent here.
And in terms of setting themselves apart, I mean, Trump there, we heard from him as well, trying to move past that rally that he had over the weekend at Madison Square Garden after a lot of controversy surrounding the commentary that came from a lot of those people who were involved. I mean, what's his message here? Is he focusing in then on the economy?
Yeah, I think what you're seeing out of Trump in particular is a focus on immigration and the border. That's been, typically his strongest performing issue. That's been the Republicans' strongest performing issue. Is really kind of hitting out there. He also made some comments, trying to distance himself from some commentary made by a speaker at his Madison Square Garden rally, including, some very disparaging comments of Puerto Ricans. You see him trying to set himself apart from there and clarify some of that. But yeah, I think with Trump, you're really seeing him kind of double down on a lot of the things that has made him really, popular within the party. And I think really the border and immigration, he's really recognized that those are, the issues that resonate most with his supporters and something that he's continuing to put out there. So yeah, it's kind of interesting to see how these messages are shaping up just within the final days of these campaigns. But both of these candidates really do seem to be sticking to topics that they believe have worked for them previously.
Do we expect any other surprises, Jill? I know it's hard to predict at this point.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I mean, as you said, Jen, we've still got 6 days to go before the election. You've got both candidates appearing, a variety more campaign stops across swing states, these big important states such as Wisconsin, Nevada, Arizona. So, I mean, you do have sort of an all-out push in the lead-up to next Tuesday. Of course, as we know, early voting has been going on for quite some time in the U.S. So there's actually quite a lot of Americans who have already cast their ballots, but obviously that final push is going to be be really important. What that ultimately means in terms of additional surprises, like what you saw, some of that commentary blowing up around the Madison Square Garden rally. We'll have to see whether anything happens. But at this point, this really seems to be a toss-up. We'll have to see what happens here.
Down to the wire, definitely. Bloomberg News Desk editor Jill Deese is joining us. Jill, thanks so much for joining us. Now, coming up, we still have a lot from FII. Nigeria's currency, though, it's hit a record low as dollar liquidity plunges over 70%. We'll speak with Tony Alumelu, United Bank for Africa chairman. He's joining us at FII. By the way, we'd like to hear from all of our viewers, so we've put together a short online survey. Scan the QR code on your screen right now to tell us what you'd like to see more of on Horizons Middle East and Africa and all of Bloomberg Television, if you must, plus any other suggestions for improvement. We'd love to hear from you. All right, stick with us. This is Bloomberg.
AI, how it has penetrated pretty much all sectors, including music. AI can write music, compose music. How do you see AI changing the landscape in fashion?
No, AI definitely helped. When I did the jewelry, I used the AI, helping me to give some, like I did, but ultimately you still have to do a lot with it, to just give you very superficial ideas and, but at the end, you still have to customize it, how to really make it and do that. I do not think
FPV drones use a specific type of battery known as a litho battery. These have the capability of discharging extremely fast, allowing the drone to accelerate like this. However, there's a big problem with these types of batteries. They're incredibly unstable and have a tendency to catch fire if you knock them too hard. So today we're going to test at what point this actually happens by dropping a litho battery at progressively higher heights. So I started with the hip height, and this is the most likely to occur when you drop it, but it handled it fine. Just a little dent in the corner. So I decided to take it further. I got my drone and moved up to 5 meters, and after dropping it, there was still no sign of fire. I kept testing it, going higher 5 meters at a time, and each time the battery would get slightly more deformed, but never showed any form of heat or fire. At the 20-meter mark, I was worried it was just going to explode on impact, but even at this height, nothing really happened. So I decided to give it one last try at 50 meters, and after dropping it, I inspected it, and we had smoke. FPV drones use a specific type of battery known as a litho battery. These have the capability of discharging extremely fast, allowing the drone to accelerate like this. However, there's a big problem with these types of batteries. They're incredibly unstable and have a tendency to catch fire if you knock them too hard. So today we're going to test at what point this actually happens by dropping a litho battery at progressively higher heights. So I started with the hip height, and this is the most likely to occur when you drop it, but it handled it fine. Just a little dent in the corner. So I decided to take it further. I got my drone and moved up to 5 meters, and after dropping it, there was still no sign of fire. I kept testing it, going higher 5 meters at a time, and each time the battery would get slightly more deformed, but never showed any form of heat or fire. At the 20-meter...
11 a.m. on the East Coast, 8 a.m. in the West. Only on Bloomberg Television. Context changes everything.
This is Horizons Middle East and Africa. Our top story this morning is Saudi Arabia's future where global finance CEOs are closely watching for global growth, the economy as well as AI, including an extensive lineup.
I aspired to the purity of the blessings.
Dazzles investors as Alphabet beats expectations.
Your flesh, as it will not decay and fade. One day the
years, and the first in history history by a female chancellor. It is a busy day, but right now it has just gone 7:30 a.m. in South Africa. I'm Jennifer Zabasaja in Johannesburg.
It's difficult to keep up with all the time zones over here. I'm actually forgetting what time it is. I'm Shimona Versace in Riyadh, where it's actually just gone 9:30 a.m. It's 8:30 in Dubai. It's 7:30 in Johannesburg. And this is the second hour of Horizons Middle East and Africa.
I think everyone will forgive you, Juana, for getting mixed up in the time zones. But listen, let's just get a check at where markets are right now, potentially giving us a look at what we're expecting for the rest of the day. If you take a U.S. equity futures, continuing to tilt higher, as you can see there, slightly pointing it towards the green. We mentioned that we got those earnings from Alphabet helping to push up the NASDAQ to an all-time high on Tuesday. Second straight day of gains for the NASDAQ on Tuesday. And that was before we got Alphabet and AMD to help kick off the tech earnings that we're getting this week. We're also paying close attention, of course, to the S&P futures tilting upwards. Gold as well in focus right now, hitting a record high and early into trading this Wednesday. Now spot gold looking at just about 2,781, up about 0.2%. And of course, as we've been paying attention over the past few days, the U.S. 10-year yield slipping ever so slightly at about 4.2462. Treasury bill on track for more than 2 years.
干老师
Economic strength that we've been seeing in the U.S. economy, helping to fuel a lot of the movements that we've been seeing in the market. And before we move to the rest of the show, I want to give you a peek at something we're paying close attention to here in South Africa. We mentioned that budget that we're going to get in the UK. We're also going to get the first budget for this new coalition government in South Africa. We have seen a number of the reforms already help driving gains in the rand, in local currency bonds, and in the benchmark index. This chart is a Bloomberg survey that is showing the expectations that we'll actually get revised growth forecasts from the Treasury later today, potentially helping boost investor sentiment yet again. So this is just showing a look at what that could potentially be over the next few years. Now let's pivot to another Southern African country and give you a Zimbabwe news. Zimbabwe's government has passed a resolution to adopt the gold-backed ZiG currency as the country's sole legal tender. That's as the ruling party looks to end the use of U.S. dollars, but no timelines have been given for when the change will actually happen. Let's bring in Bloomberg's Andira Oganga, who is joining us from Kigali. So Andira, walk us through this. What more do we know?
Jen, so what we know is that the ZANU-PF was holding its annual conference where delegates came from all parts of the country to discuss social, political, and economic issues in the country. And this de-dollarization agenda was one of the resolutions. And because it's the ruling party, most of its directives anchor and inform government policy. So we are likely to see it throw a little bit of weight behind the declaration by the president in 2023 to fully de-dollarize the economy, though timelines remain uncertain. How they could do this is they could gradually phase out the dollar while injecting and increasing circulation of ZiG in the market. This is to avoid economic shocks and also ensure that there isn't extreme pressure on the ZiG. Alternatively, they could introduce legislation that mandates 100% transactions of ZiG. They did this in 2019. It didn't end well because their currency ended up losing 80% of its value to the dollar, and the ZiG dollar ended up being decommissioned.
What does this mean then for the economy, Andiro? As you mentioned, I mean, the currency has really been a drag for a number of years, but are we seeing any benefits right now?
Jen, not likely, because the central bank was forced to devalue the Zimbabwean gold by 43% in September. And this was
Holy shit.
$40 raise to civil servants. But local labor unions say that this has not gone along with, because if you look at the difference between the official rate and the power of rate, is a huge difference from the official rate and the power of rate. The central bank is going to have to raise to 2.5% from 20, and this is likely to be
傻小，录到片靠呗。
The United Bank for Africa Chairman. Wonderful to have you with us. Unfortunately, it's happening at a time where the Nigerian Naira continues to lose some ground. It remains under pressure despite some of the government's recent reforms. What do you think the government needs to do to bring back confidence in the currency here?
I think the confidence is gradually coming back. However, for currency to be strong, we need to strengthen our productive sector as a country. And I think that is where we need to focus a lot more on. I believe that currencies go up and down, but in the long run, if the right economic fundamentals are there, in the macroeconomic environment, right, ultimately the currency will find its true value. Most of us believe that the Naira value today does not represent what it should be. However, we need to strengthen our productive capacity as a country. We need to fix electricity so that we can industrialize Nigeria. To me, that is one very critical thing we need to do.
Intelligence system that puts powerful generative capabilities into apps and experiences across your Mac. It draws on the immense power of Apple Silicon to run multiple generative models right on Mac Mini. And with private cloud compute, it can also tap into larger server-based models while protecting your privacy. This unlocks awesome new ways to quickly get things done on Mini. For example, say a note comparing info about your new suppliers starts to get unwieldy. With writing tools on your Mac Mini, you can turn it into an easy-to-read table in a flash. And when your teammate asks you to send over a key product shot, you can use cleanup in Photos to remove an unwanted distraction from the background, just like that. Apple Intelligence also transforms system experiences that you rely on, like Siri, which can now answer thousands of questions about features on your Mac. Don't know how to combine PDF files in Preview? Just ask Siri, and it'll give you a step-by-step guide. And when Siri gains the ability to tap into your personal context and take actions for you, it'll make so many tasks faster and easier. Like when you're getting ready for a trip and need your passport number, you won't have to go searching for your photos, notes, and emails. Siri will be able to find the number and fill it in for you. That only scratches the surface of all of the ways that Apple Intelligence transforms the things you do every day on your Mac. It's available now with macOS Sequoia as a free software update in US English, with more languages to come. And we can't wait for you to take it for a spin on Mac Mini. Apple Intelligence is made possible by the tremendous power of Apple Silicon. And on that front, there's even more in store. To tell you all about it, here's Tim Millay.
When you look at the M-series chips that we build for our pro users, there's nothing else like them. We start with our industry-leading CPU, GPU, and neural engine. Then we do something no one else does. We pair them with an extremely high bandwidth and high capacity unified memory architecture. And add in our latest advanced technologies while maintaining the unmatched power efficiency of Apple Silicon. This results in tremendously powerful chips that deliver unprecedented performance, capabilities, and power efficiency for the most demanding workloads. The next chip for pro users takes a massive leap. Introducing M4 Pro. M4 Pro takes the advanced technologies debuted in M4 and scales them up to tackle even more demanding workloads. It starts with our incredible CPU performance core, which delivers lightning-fast single-threaded performance. In fact, it's the world's fastest CPU core. So everyday tasks like launching apps happen instantly, and complex web pages are more responsive than ever. M4 Pro has a new 14-core CPU complex for phenomenal multi-threaded performance. And its 20-core GPU is twice as powerful as the one in M4. M4 Pro also features a massive 75% increase in memory bandwidth over M3 Pro. Now that's twice as much bandwidth as any AI PC chip, and it's especially impactful when running AI workloads. So multi-threaded CPU performance is up to 1.9 times faster than M1 Pro, and up to 2.1 times faster than the latest AI PC chip. And GPU performance is also up to 1.9 times faster than M1 Pro. and a remarkable 2.4 times faster than the PC chip. This huge boost in performance makes building and testing apps across multiple simulators in Xcode quicker than ever. With the improved hardware-accelerated ray tracing engine in the M4 family GPU, Pro 3D renderers produce stunning imagery in even less time. And games like Control, with its ray-traced effects, look way more compelling. Finally, the Neural Engine is over 3 times faster than the one in M1 Pro. And when you combine that with the huge uplift in unified memory bandwidth, on-device Apple Intelligence models run at blazing speed. So that's M4 Pro. With incredible CPU and GPU performance, huge increase in memory bandwidth, and a faster neural engine, it's far more powerful and capable than any AI PC chip. Now, back to Shloka.
With M4 Pro, Mac Mini packs incredible pro-level performance into a remarkably small form. It's up to 2 times faster than Mini with M2 Pro for intensive tasks like motion graphics, so you can breeze through things like creating animated sequences in After Effects. And compared to the fastest Intel-based Mac Mini, on-device AI workloads like transcription are up to 20 times faster. M4 Pro also delivers a huge step forward in connectivity. It brings Thunderbolt 5 to the Mac. It more than doubles transfer speeds up to an incredible 120 gigabits per second. So you'll be able to use even faster external storage and connect to more accessories at the same time. With the higher system bandwidth of Thunderbolt 5 and the ability to connect up to 3 displays, you can create a more capable setup than ever before. The versatility of the new Mini allows so many people to use it in so many different ways. With its small size, great performance, and wide array of ports, you can create your dream workspace, whether you're a gamer, photographer, designer, producer, or coder. And it's perfect for large institutions too. Enterprises can easily deploy and manage thousands of minis, enabling employees to be more productive and workspaces to be more energy efficient. And with the industry-leading reliability of macOS, healthcare systems can count on Mini when providing critical care. So that's the new small but fierce Mac Mini. With Apple Intelligence, outrageous performance, and even better connectivity in a surprisingly compact form. The new Mini is the lovable little Mac that can do it all. Now, back to John.
It's amazing how much performance we've put into that tiny Mac Mini. It now comes standard with 16 gigabytes of memory, and yet it still starts at just $599, which makes it an outstanding combination of performance and features at a terrific price. You can pre-order it today, and it'll be available next week. So that's the incredibly mighty new Mac Mini with the amazing features of Apple Intelligence. There is no other desktop like it. We're glad you could join us today, and there's still more news coming tomorrow in our series of exciting announcements for the Mac.
Let your heart see the colors
大明老师哎。
Hello and welcome back to Apple Park for our first event of 2021. After the challenges of this past year, we're optimistic that brighter days are just in front of us. As we move forward, we feel it's important that Apple continues to make a difference in people's lives through our products and our values. So we're glad you could join us today for some exciting updates and announcements. This week marks the annual Earth Day celebration, and I couldn't be more proud of the environmental initiatives and commitments we are making at Apple. Today, Apple is carbon neutral for our global corporate operations, with all of our offices, stores, and data centers running on 100% renewable energy. And by 2030, Apple will be 100% carbon neutral across our entire end-to-end footprint, including our supply chain and the use of our products. This month, we launched the Restore Fund in partnership with Conservation International and Goldman Sachs. This pioneering new investment fund will provide returns that are measured not only financially, but by the tons of atmospheric carbon removed by each investment.
一直在偷看你的侧脸，我把你逮住。跟你们说，我今天连牛爸都没吃，我就切手脸，所以侧面应该还蛮像。可是胸贴一个不小心可能会露出来。它这个粉红色的。哦，很棒吧？这个衣服穿起来很舒服。那我们就直接这样穿。不用穿内衣耶。对啊。哇，不用穿内衣。你们等一下，你们这样没有画面感觉，更容易背。不是我怕你会被背啊，你这样更容易被。
Integrity, but yes, AI is increasingly a tool that's augmenting what the investment professionals are doing and basically enabling them to get to a decision or a new investment idea or evaluate a new investment idea much quicker than they could before.
When you think about the business as a whole, I think in the past you've spoken about wanting to increase your lending capabilities. Can you just talk us through where you see the biggest opportunities for growth there?
So, I mean, we are largely a fee-for-service business. If you think about what we do, we manage money or we service those that are in the investment business, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds. But some of those activities actually require the extension of credit. Sometimes it's for intraday or overnight liquidity. So all of our credit activities are to support our clients in the businesses that we're in.
And does that change in a region where some of these Middle East clients are actually flush with liquidity and are sitting on a lot of cash?
Yes and no, because for any given transaction, they may be flush with liquidity, but that liquidity isn't available to actually finance a particular transaction. So not really is what I would say. I think it's to be able to provide that liquidity for our clients is actually quite important.
Fair enough. Well, I've got to ask you, we've got U.S. elections coming up. I'm going to ask you for your prognosis on who you think is going to come out on top. But from a market's perspective, volatility has started to creep up, and this is expected to be a quite volatile event, irrespective of who wins. How do you position your systems for that?
So for us, we spend a lot of time answering questions of our clients or advising clients on how they position their own portfolios.
Yeah.
From a technology perspective, we certainly have focused on our systems and their ability to be stable in something like this. But I think the most important thing about this election is that there be certainty relatively quickly in terms of the outcome. What you don't want to have is an uncertain outcome for an extended period of time.
Yeah, exactly. Or contested results, for example.
Right.
Earlier this summer, there were a couple of sort of freak episodes in markets and markets trading. Beginning of August, beginning of September, you saw those big down days in the Nikkei that had knock-on effects on global markets. How, again, are your systems coping with these increasing VAR shock events that seem to be happening not just more often, but when they do happen with increasing amount of intensity?
I think the most important thing from a technological perspective is being able to evaluate what is it that's happening, why it's happening, and then to very quickly be able to go to clients and say, this is what we're observing. Oftentimes it's lack of liquidity in a particular segment of the marketplace.
Yeah.
And again, it's hard to believe that when you think about how liquid some of these markets are, but when you think about some of the trading volumes that have occurred in particular instruments on days like that, in fact, you end up with a shortage of liquidity.
Yeah, yeah. And where are you seeing a pickup in trading volumes right now? Which geographic areas would you say has been the biggest growth?
Well, right now, with the approach of the election, obviously you're seeing a lot in the U.S. and a lot of positioning around that. Some positioning around equities, some positioning around treasuries. But in terms of trading volumes overall in the aggregate, I mean, financial economies follow real economies. And as real economies grow, the financial economy tends to grow at a multiple of that. And that's what we've seen in the development of all economies over the past 30, 40 years. And so, again, you think about a region like this with very significant outsized growth relative to the rest of the world. You're seeing a growth in the financial economy and a growth in volumes. Right here in Saudi, when you think about the Saudi Stock Exchange and the amount of volume that's on that in a very short period of time.
I just want to bring it back to the interest rate environment. And of course, the Fed have started to ease. They cut interest rates by 50 basis points, but interest rates are still pretty high. And you've got this strange scenario where it seems as though investors are piling into stock markets. The stock markets are doing very well, but at the same time are sitting on a lot of cash too. Is that a phenomenon that you see as well? Are investors sitting on more or less cash than usual?
So investors are sitting on a lot of cash, and what they wanted to see was what was going to happen with interest rates and the intersection of interest rates and the economy. And I think that the central banks, led by the Federal Reserve, have done a really good job in terms of engineering the so-called soft landing. And so there is that cash on the sidelines. It's down a little bit, but your point's well taken that there's still a lot of cash, which we see as an opportunity for markets going forward.
Yeah.
The market, as interest rates decline, those volumes ought to go down as that money seeks higher returns.
Yeah. Well, Ron, we're going to leave it there. It's been really fantastic talking to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. That was Ron O'Hanley, State Street CEO, joining us here at FII. Jen?
From group the third quarter.
All right, let me pick up on that. I'm going to pick up on that. We're having a bit of technical issues with Jennifer, but what she was trying to say is that UBS earnings have broken through. It's been a really busy couple of days for earnings. So let me just bring you the numbers from UBS. A massive beat on third quarter net income coming at $1.43 billion versus an estimate of 783, so almost double versus estimates. Let me just bring you some of the other headlines as well. Revenue coming in at $12.3 billion versus estimates of $11.46 billion. They will be reviewing their post-2025 capital return ambitions on Swiss rules, on track to deliver on the ambition of achieving $100 billion in NNA, that is the net assets for 2024. And then they see mid-single-digit decline in GWN net interest income in the fourth quarter. The regulatory adjustment cuts the CET1 ratio to 14.3% from 14.9%. So that is what's going on there. And just to give you some further color as well around the integration costs as we continue to piece together the UBS and Credit Suisse integration, UBS sees fourth quarter integration related expenses at around 1.2 billion. So massive beats coming through for UBS this morning. Now, moving on to another big story in the UK today, the Chancellor Rachel Reeves is expected to unveil a major package of tax hikes and extra borrowing in her first budget later today, a move which is likely to define British politics for the rest of the decade. Joining us now is our UK correspondent, Lizzie Burden. What a huge event coming up, Lizzie. I feel like we've been talking about October 30 for weeks now. What is at stake with this budget?
You're absolutely right, Jemana. In fact, Rachel Reeves has waited longer than any of her predecessors in more than half a century to deliver this first budget. 117 days she's kept everybody waiting, and that has allowed time for fear to fester and for consumers and businesses to be spooked by this economic narrative of doom and gloom. So it's hugely significant. It's the first Labour budget in 14 years, the first time ever that a woman will be carrying that red box as Chancellor. And Reeves herself has compared it to the historic Labour budgets of 1945, 1964, 1997. So setting real expectations here, because you say this is going to define British politics for the rest of the decade, but it could also be consequential, Jemana, for markets as well. We're still recovering, mentally at least, from that mini budget, which was only 2 years ago from Liz Truss. The question is, in those past 117 days, has Rachel Reeves done enough to roll the pitch, to prepare the markets for the change to the fiscal rules that she's going to make, and in order to borrow one of the most amounts in the UK's history?
Yep, that's certainly a lot on the table and a lot of pressure on the Chancellor to deliver. So let's see whether it actually translates to growth for the UK economy. That was Lizzie Burden. Well, thank you for joining us on this journey in FII the last couple of days. Right now, that is it for our show, but we're going to hand you over to Daybreak Europe. We will have more interviews throughout the rest of the day.
I prided myself, probably wrongly, having worked in many countries, been brought up as a child in the Middle East and in the Far East, having a mother who was not British, she was Hungarian, she was a survivor from Auschwitz, I was the son of a Holocaust survivor, and being involved with lots of people, and I thought to myself, I know a lot about diversity. And I know about inclusion and not being included. But actually, when I came out, I realized that my level of understanding was not very high. And actually, I could see both the support and the rejection of being different, and what you had to do to live a life where you were different. And I'm immensely pleased that I was outed when I was 60, just under 60. Because had I not been outed, I probably would have said I could stay in the closet and still believe that I knew everything, which I didn't. And that was a very important moment for me.
Bloomberg Surveillance covers the latest in global markets and the political events that influence your world. Join Jonathan Farrell, Lisa Abramowitz, and Anne-Marie Hordern only on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
Good morning, this is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. I'm Tom Mackenzie in London. These are the stories that set your agenda. A big beat for UBS. The Swiss lender smashes expectations with net income almost doubling estimates. We will hear from the bank's CEO in the next hour. The tale of two AI fortunes. Google's bet on the technology sends cloud sales sky high. But chip maker AMD slumps as its AI revenue grows more slowly than some had expected. Plus, Kamala Harris warns a second Donald Trump presidency will bring, quote, chaos and division. Her opponent lays into her record on border control. We will have the latest on the US presidential campaign. Happy Wednesday, everyone. So the earnings story front and centre with the beat coming through from UBS. We await VW with the earnings report at 6:30 UK time. Currently, European futures lower by 0.4% after some modest losses yesterday. Worth noting that the Nasdaq Composite racked up a fresh record high stateside. Alphabet powering through. Post hours, some strength coming through. AMD, the forecast a little disappointing, even though on the quarter, AMD did beat. FTSE 100 futures currently pointing low by 0.5%. A massive day for the UK with the budget finally from Rachel Reeves. The details on those tax hikes and cuts, potential cuts to spending. S&P futures then currently pointing to gains of 0.1%. Nasdaq futures edging higher by 15 points. Let's flip the board and look cross asset. It's been the worst month, set to be the worst month for US Treasuries in about 2 years. The US 10-year currently at 4.24. The assessments about the strength of the US economy, expectations as well, the build-up to that vote out of the US with the election, of course, front and centre, leading to the sell-off. Yields currently at 4.24 on the benchmark. The pound in focus today on that budget, the drum roll beat to the expectations around that, and the details from Rachel Reeves. Could be some volatility around the pound. Watching gilts as well. How much sensitivity in these debt markets to higher borrowing from this government. 130 currently on the pound versus the US dollar. Bitcoin breaking through close to fresh record highs. 72,000 on expectations that possibly Trump could win this election. Certainly that's the view from some betting on that cryptocurrency. Gold close to records as well. In fact, adding 0.3% so far in the session on the yellow metal. Currently at 2,781. Let's get back to the earnings story right now, because just 15 minutes ago, the earnings dropped from UBS, posting third quarter results that broadly beat expectations, but warning of headwinds ranging from the US elections to falling interest income. Let's bring in Bloomberg Senior European Finance Editor Jeff Black for the details. Jeff, good morning. What stood out to you from these numbers from UBS?
That the estimates were too low. No, in fact, it was a really solid quarter across all the business units. We saw that lending income has held up, even with an atmosphere of falling interest rates. We've seen that elsewhere this quarter, but also UBS did quite well in keeping their costs down. The investment bank, deal makers, and advisory and the markets unit, they did well. Global wealth management, that did very well, even with slightly lower interest income there. And even the non-core unit, which is where the Credit Suisse stuff is held, that posted a loss that was lower than expected. So pretty pleasing for them all around. However, headwinds.
Yeah, talk us a little bit more through those potential headwinds then, Jeff, that were flagged, and where are we in terms of building the Credit Suisse business into UBS? What is the current time frame on that?
Right, so on the headwinds, I think it's a theme that we're seeing elsewhere, which is interest rate reductions in the US, in the euro area, they're beginning to feed through. It's as simple as that, and there's a pretty mechanical relationship. The bank did warn about the risks from geopolitics and from the US elections, although it's not entirely clear whether that could be good or bad for the bank, because in times of volatility, the investment bank does well, clients want to shift their portfolios. In terms of the integration, UBS is well ahead of schedule. What they're doing now is moving clients over onto their systems. They've done large parts of that in Asia. They're doing it in Switzerland, and they should be finished that into next year. So they are reporting solid progress there.
Okay, making progress on that integration ahead of schedule. Jeff Black on the earnings story as well for UBS, Bloomberg Senior European Finance Editor. Jeff, thank you for your time this morning. We're going to hear from the UBS CEO, Sergio Amotti, at 7 a.m. London time, so stay tuned for that interview on the back of that very solid beat then for UBS. Talking of the earnings story, we have the giant, the chemicals giant, of course, over in Germany, BASF, with that big exposure to industrials and autos, essentially in line with the estimates is the top take, I would say, for BASF. The redhead as well, they expect to reach the low end, BASF expecting to reach the low end of their full year adjusted earnings forecast range. So holding that forecast, but expected to come in at the low end. And again, in terms of the earnings, coming in just modestly above the estimates, but broadly across multiple metrics, largely in line with expectations for a company, of course, that's faced those supply chain challenges and that exposure to a slowing Chinese economy. Let's cross over, talking of China, to Asia right now. Ava Hong standing by in Singapore for a check on the Asian markets. Ava, what's standing out to you this morning?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, Tom, we are seeing Chinese equities, the weak link in Asia today. And this is on a day when Japanese equities are the outlier. They are helping to cap those declines on the region's benchmark, held along by some of the gains in the chips, the banking names, but also on what you're seeing in the Chinese, or rather the Japanese yen. Overall, it is a story of relative weakness. I mean, you think about the BOJ decision that's due tomorrow, but perhaps more importantly, the guidance from Ueda-san, and given the US and Japan election uncertainties, it seems pretty unlikely he's going to provide clear guidance for a December-January rate hike. So that's what we're seeing in terms of the Japanese currency expectations. But as I said, it is China that is the weak link today. For a second session, CSI 300 is down. Let's flip the board and take a closer look at how it has fared in the past 2 months. It has erased gains for the month of October, pulled further away from the peaks that we saw earlier this month. A lot of this has got to do with the stimulus optimism that's just fizzled out. I mean, we have reports that Chinese authorities are mulling 10 trillion yuan in fiscal stimulus, but that 6 trillion yuan number that had previously been floating around was part of this potential fiscal stimulus package. So yet more a cause for disappointment. And then you have the CSI 300 in terms of some of the companies that have been reporting, and more than half of them have reported. It's looking pretty negative, downside surprises. Flip the board again. I wanted to talk you through this chart because next week is not just about the US election or the Fed. There is also China's NPC. The top legislators are meeting. And you can see here the 2-week implied volatility on dollar offshore yuan is shot way above what we see on 1 year, which tells you that currency traders are expecting a lot of big swings. Tom.
Yeah, really important to flag, as you say, that major event out of China and any additional details on that stimulus effort. Ava Hong in Singapore, thank you very much indeed with a breakdown in the Asian markets and looking ahead to next week. Now, to the tech story and the earnings front. Another Magnificent Seven member dazzling investors as Google parent Alphabet beats expectations. Chipmaker AMD, though, slumping after its fourth quarter revenue forecast misses, in a sign that its AI sales are growing more slowly than some had anticipated. Let's bring in our tech reporter, Annabelle Drulers. Annabelle, let's start with AMD then, because top line for the current quarter, the most recent quarter, it was a beat for AMD. But as we said, it's the forecast that seems to be the disappointment here.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it sort of speaks to just the amount or the scope of the expectations that are on these AI chip companies to deliver. Because, yes, to your point, we actually saw AMD doing better than expected in the third quarter. And they also said that they're looking for around $5 billion in sales from their so-called AI accelerators this year. So that's sort of the hardware that powers these AI tools or contributes to the training of them. But exactly what really disappointed investors, as you said, it came down to the forecast, because the company said for the fourth quarter, they're essentially expecting $7.5 billion in revenue. Now, $7.5 billion, that's from the company. What Wall Street analysts had been expecting was for 7.55. So it's close, but obviously not good enough, and you did see that after-hours slump there. Again, it's sort of that story for AMD. They compete, as you can see here. Take a look at their sort of chips growth versus the main one in the space, which is really NVIDIA when it comes down to AI chips. And AMD just continues to play catch up, but they're obviously quite a far cry at this time.
Yeah, and they would be hoping to sell into a company like Alphabet, one of the hyperscalers, of course. And when it comes to Alphabet, the earnings on that front were a solid beat, Annabelle. What kind of stood out to you from the numbers coming through from the parent company of Google?
Yeah, well, exactly. You mentioned the cloud there, and that really was sort of what stood out to everyone. But you think about sort of cloud infrastructure and who's the main ones in this space. Well, firstly, there's Amazon, there's Microsoft, and then there's Alphabet. And when people talk about cloud infrastructure and cloud services for AI, it's just that pie, but that pie keeps expanding, and so companies can continue to gain a larger market share. This was certainly the case for Apple or Alphabet rather in the latest period. They came in with revenue at $74.6 billion. That was better than what had been projected of $73 billion. And you can see here cloud are beating there. But also advertising, subscriptions, platforms, devices, across the board, we did see some strong numbers coming through. The question, of course, is how long that optimism around AI and cloud continues to drive growth for the business. And this was obviously something that came up in the earnings call. The management team was asked about this, and they did say that, yes, on the one hand, we're scaling the business, we're seeing greater efficiencies, we're continuing to gain further market share. On the other hand as well, they are looking at headwinds from cost and depreciation. So the big question really is, how does Alphabet manage that going forward? But right now, you look at the margins for the Alphabet or the Google Cloud business in particular, 17% in the latest period. That was versus expectations of 10.4%. They're clearly making a lot of money from this business.
Yeah, that margin gap is significant, isn't it? 17 versus 10. Our tech reporter, Annabelle Drewers, with a great breakdown there of the earnings from AMD and Alphabet. Thank you. To UK politics now and the economic forecasts going forward on the back of this budget then. A pivotal day for the UK. The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, expected to unveil, of course, a major package of tax hikes and extra borrowing today. The much-anticipated budget will play a big part in setting the tone for British politics for the rest of the decade. Let's bring in Bloomberg's Lizzie Burden for the details. Lizzie, remind us of some of the changes we are expecting from this key budget.
Well, if we go right back to July and the electoral campaign, you remember that Labour made some really lofty promises, Tom, just to get into government. So they said that there would be no return to austerity, whatever that means, that there would be no tax hikes on working people, whoever they are. And yet, we're expecting today to see just how far Rachel Reeves is willing to stretch those definitions to plug this £22 billion hole in the public finances that she keeps reminding us exists. So we're expecting £35 billion of revenue-raising measures, including a rise in national insurance contributions for employers, not employees, employers, and that's been dubbed the jobs tax. It would raise about £20 billion. We're expecting rises in capital gains tax and inheritance tax, which are controversial, given that Labour said that they had no plans to increase taxes beyond what was scoped out in the manifesto. But the point is that Rachel Reeves really wants to make sure that spending day to day is covered by tax revenue, and she's made promises to increase spending, for example, on the National Health Service. Beyond that, for the longer term, she's laid the groundwork for a change to the fiscal rules so that she can borrow to invest. That would be about £70 billion over the next 5 years. And the question for the Office for Budget Responsibility, as you mentioned, the Fiscal Watch watchdog is going to be the extent to which that means she can actually grow the economy, because Labour's top priority is to grow the economy by 2.5% annually.
Yeah, and the scrutiny from that watchdog and whatever they say around this extra borrowing will be consequential for the gilt markets as well. We know they've been sensitive. There's been a bit of a sell-off. That leads to a question around the role of the Bank of England and how closely they're going to be scrutinising this budget, given their next meeting is next week.
Yes, exactly. And we have to ask whether that hammering gilts took last week is the extent of this. Is the pitch rolling that Rachel Reeves has done enough to quell a market reaction today? We do not want a repeat of the mini budget, which was only 2 years ago under Liz Truss. As it goes for the Bank of England, it comes back to this question of whether the OBR sees this budget growing or squeezing the economy. Markets currently pricing a 25 basis point cut in November. Our economists reckon that this budget will amount to a fiscal loosening, and that means that the BOE is going to take rates lower but at a slower pace, despite Andrew Bailey, the governor, dangling this prospect of more aggressive rate cuts. So that will be interesting. As I say, the target is 2.5% growth a year. Labour could frame this as they need to stay in office for more than 5 years to get to 2.5%, and they need a decade of national renewal. So let's see where the OBR comes out.
Yeah, they'll have to address that hammering they've had in the polls as well. But of course, they've got a number of years to do that. Lizzie Burton, thank you very much indeed on a consequential day for the UK leading up to that budget. We're going to have special coverage, of course, of that UK budget from 12:30 p.m. UK time. Lizzie Burton will be across all of that with some great guests as well throughout the day, so stay tuned. Coming up, the countdown to the US election is on as candidates, of course, ramp up their attacks on each other ahead of next week's vote. We're going to bring you the latest next. This is Bloomberg.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute business news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Anne-Marie Verdern in Ukraine, and this is Bloomberg.
There is this real momentum from Wall Street. We are basically deep in the European earnings season.
Take a look at how we're faring when it comes to Asian markets.
November 5th, election night is here. Trust Bloomberg for up-to-the-minute results as the races for the White House and Congress are decided, as well as detailed analysis of what it all means for the economy, markets, geopolitics, and more. Tune in at 5 p.m. Eastern for an extended balance of power leading into full team coverage at 7, live from the Battleground States and Harris and Trump HQ. It's election night on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
Key investors, top executives, global innovators. Join me for in-depth conversations with the biggest newsmakers on the day's top stories. Insight with Haslinda Anand, only on Bloomberg.
Welcome back. Less than a week ahead of polling day, Democrat presidential candidate Kamala Harris has argued a second Donald Trump presidency would be steeped in chaos and division.
America, we know what Donald Trump has in mind. More chaos, more division, and policies that help those at the very top and hurt everyone else. I offer a different path, and I ask for your vote.
Harris spoke at the same spot where Republican nominee Trump rallied supporters on January the 6th, 2021. That led, of course, to those chaotic scenes. Let's bring in Bloomberg's Derek Wallbank for how this campaign is unfolding in the last and final days. Derek, what challenges does Harris still face on her campaign?
Well, Tom, look, it's a razor's edge right now, a week out, and you've got 7 key swing states that we've all identified for more than a year that are going to sort of determine who wins here. And across those 7 states, right now, polling averages have every single one of them very, very tight. So it's hard to say right now which way this goes. You can read good things into it if you're the Trump campaign. It looks like their voters are coming out in force in the early votes, particularly in places like Georgia, like Nevada, like Arizona. At the same time, if you're the Harris campaign, you are polling a little bit better in places like Michigan. And additionally, we're seeing a pretty wide gender gap here. And when you say something like a gender gap, you do have to note that women tend to vote a little bit more than men. So the idea that women are voting a little bit more for Harris, men are voting a little bit more for Trump, if that evens out, that's probably good news for Harris. So depending on how you read some of these early tea leaves, you can kind of get a little bit either way, which is all to say it's a little bit too close to call.
Yeah, indeed. So that's the case on Harris and how things are evolving. And certainly that gender story is going to be potentially really consequential, isn't it? When it comes to Trump, campaigning in Pennsylvania, a key swing state, clearly. What is the latest there on his campaign?
Yeah, Tom, I think the key swing state. Look, if you were going to ask me which one state to watch, which one state do I want to know the outcome of, I'm going to tell you it's Pennsylvania, right? It's critical to both of their fortunes. It's hard to see a way for Donald Trump to win if he doesn't win Pennsylvania. It's hard to see a way for Kamala Harris to win if she doesn't win Pennsylvania. Not impossible, but very hard. Most of their paths do include those states. Now, Donald Trump is a little bit on the defensive. He had a rally at Madison Square Garden just recently where several of the comments that were made from the podium by Trump, but particularly by allies of his who were put on stage by his campaign, have come under deep scrutiny. Kamala Harris has particularly made issue of one set of comments about Puerto Rican voters, of whom voters of Puerto Rican heritage are, maybe 500,000 in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It's not a small number of people, as well as quite a large population in places like Florida, as well as in New York, where there's a bunch of key House states. So Donald Trump has been on defensive there. At the same point, there were some comments that came out early in the morning, your time, by President Joe Biden, where he appeared to call some of Donald Trump's supporters garbage. There's a debate about whether or not he was speaking about one person or a bunch of people, but that's something that I've seen Republican members of Congress, as well as Trump himself, try and turn to kind of stanch that bleeding a little bit. So right now, I think you would have said the last couple of weeks it had been a little bit more on Donald Trump's terms this campaign. Right now had been on Harris's terms coming out of the weekend, and certainly that rally that she had at the Ellipse near the White House was one that was very, very well attended, and will be one where she was hoping to set a positive tone and a contrasting tone with Trump going into that final week.
Okay, Bloomberg's Derek Wallbank with a granular take on this US election campaign and that deep expertise. Derek, thank you very much indeed. Bloomberg News, by the way, strategists and reporters will be participating in a live blog Q&A and answering questions from Bloomberg subscribers on what the US election means for their money, the economy and businesses. You can email your questions to bloombergqa@bloomberg.net. And you can watch the Q&A at TLive Go on the terminal and on the Bloomberg.com website. Coming up, Standard Chartered tops estimates and vows to return at least $8 billion to investors by 2026. That's an upgrade to the buybacks and the return of cash to shareholders. We're going to speak to the company's CFO shortly. Stay with us. This is Bloomberg.
season is here.
I know it's like your Super Bowl,
I
right?
can't wait. It's like opening presents in the morning.
All right, it will be exciting.
Nobody covers earnings like Bloomberg.
DOJ or other authorities.
Bigger times. Next.
And what's going to keep reading World Cup? This is
As the economic picture.
covering the intersections of Hollywood.
I'm Professor Hannah Fry, mathematician and writer. In this series, I will meet the companies, people, and pioneers transforming the world.
It's like the Jetsons meets the Flintstones.
Whatever future you dream of, if it affects us, I will explore it. The future is coming.
As we spend some time here on the broader presidential race.
Let's focus in on European politics.
Makes you wonder how politics might play out.
Welcome back. US job openings fell in September. They fell to the lowest since early 2021, running counter to the September employment report and other data that point to a strong labour market in the US. For more, let's bring in Bloomberg's Valerie Teitel to unpick what is going on with the jobs market of the US. Talk us through what your reading is of the jobs numbers of yesterday, then, Valerie.
Look, Tom, the market was relieved that we got some weak data on the labor market in the U.S. We've had a string of hot data recently. This one was the first one in a while to come in on the downside. It was a big miss when it comes to the job openings numbers. We expected to see a tick up in those job openings in the U.S. We actually saw a tick down. Now, as you mentioned, the JOLTS data, it is a volatile series, and the respondents from the JOLTS data is a low percentage. So we look to Friday's payroll report to confirm or deny this JOLTS data. We also have the private payroll number today, the ADP. The market will be watching that too. But if you flip on the board, we also got consumer confidence data out from the U.S. yesterday. Now, this showed a almost conflicting picture, Tom. We saw the largest rise in consumer confidence since 2021. So another largest jump in 3 years on consumer confidence. So these are showing conflicting stories of the U.S. economy. But if you look at how the U.S. 10-year yield traded during these data releases, Tom, we were way more focused on the more weak labor market hints that we got from that JOLTS report. The U.S. 10-year yield traded all the way up to 433 yesterday. After this data, we did rally nearly 10 basis points. We're trading at 424 right now. We do have some more data out from the U.S. today. It's U.S. GDP, where we do get a hint of the third quarter PCE.
Okay, Bloomberg's Valerie Teitel, our markets reporter, on some of that key US data, giving us some clarity there in terms of what it means for these markets. Valerie, thank you. Coming up, Standard Chartered rallying in Hong Kong after the bank topped estimates in the third quarter and ramped up its share buyback plans. We're going to speak live to the company's CFO. That is next. This is Bloomberg. Plus, Bloomberg terminal users already messaging us with questions and comments, but we'd like to hear from all our viewers. So we put together a short online survey. Click the QR code on screen now to tell us what you'd like to see more of on Bloomberg TV and anything you would change. Your feedback will be used to make the best programs we can, we promise. Plenty more coming up. Stay with us. This is Bloomberg.
It's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. We'll show you what's happening in ETFs like no one else. Bloomberg ETF IQ, Monday on Bloomberg. Bloomberg has the Fed decision under surveillance with the fastest coverage and exclusive analysis, including Powell's press conference. Nobody covers the Fed like Bloomberg.
Asia is at the forefront of some of the world's biggest stories. I'm Sherrian in Tokyo.
And I'm Heidi Stroud-Watts here in Sydney where the trading day begins. We're here in the centre of all the action to get you set up with the numbers, news and knowledge you need for the day ahead.
The demand is indeed recovering. We've been waiting for this moment.
The opportunity of a century.
Join us on Bloomberg The Asia Trade. Weekdays only on Bloomberg TV. Context changes everything.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute technology news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Annabelle Drawlers in Taipei, and this is Bloomberg.
Good morning, this is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. I'm Tom McKenzie in London. These are the stories that set your agenda. A big beat for UBS. The Swiss lender smashes expectations with net income almost doubling estimates. We will hear from the bank's CEO in half an hour. A tale of two AI fortunes. Google's bet on the technology sends cloud sales sky high, but chipmaker AMD slumps as its AI revenue underwhelms investors. Plus, UK Chancellor Rachel Reeves looks set to unveil billions in tax hikes and extra borrowing. We will preview the first Labour budget in 14 years. Let's get back to the earnings story. It is a massive miss for VW. Third quarter operating profit coming in at 2.86 billion euros. Well below the estimates of 3.9 billion euros. VW posting its lowest profit margin since the pandemic. Third quarter revenue coming in at 78 billion euros. The estimates have been for 76 billion, so that's in terms of the revenue for VW. But again, operating profit, a huge miss. VW still sees full year automotive cash flow of about 2 billion. They had estimated 3 billion. So in terms of expectations around cash flow, well below the estimates as well. The operating margin taking a hit, 3.6%. The estimates had been for 4.3%. No doubt executives will use this huge miss in terms of the operating profit to push their case that they need to close at least 3 of the factories in Germany. We know the conversations with labour unions will continue today. Those negotiations continue, of course, to be fraught. And this is a company, of course, facing that competitive threat from China and a slowing picture when it comes to the demand outlook for electric vehicles. So that story, consequential, we'll get more details on that for you shortly. In terms of the economic front, on the macroeconomic picture then, the GDP dropping for France, coming through in terms of quarter on quarter. The most recent quarter is actually an increase from the survey. So quarterly GDP out of France increasing 0.4%. The survey had been for an increase of 0.3%. In terms of year on year, you're seeing an increase of GDP growth out of France, 1.3%. That is year on year for growth out of France in the third quarter. The surveys had been for 1.2%. So a slightly better picture on the growth front for France. Let's get back to the markets right now. Of course, continue to weigh up the earnings story. We have the beat coming through from Standard Chartered. We will unpick that for you. We have further earnings crossing from GSK, the drug maker in the UK, later in the day. European futures currently pointing lower by 0.2%. 3100 futures off by 0.4. S&P futures looking to gains of around 0.2%, and Nasdaq futures on the 100 at least looking to add 46 points after the Nasdaq Composite had a fresh record yesterday. Let's flip the board and have a look. Cross assets, what's happening? We're scrutinising the pound in the lead up, of course, to that crucial budget out of the UK. 130 on the pound. The US 10-year, by the way, at 4.24. A little bit of movement into treasuries after what has been a challenging month, of course, and the sell-off has been there. Bitcoin close to record levels, up 0.1% so far in the session. Gold gold pushing to further highs, up 0.4 on the yellow metal. Let's get back to the earnings story with a focus on the banking space. Standard Chartered shares in Hong Kong higher today after the bank topped estimates in the third quarter. The company is also vowing to return at least $8 billion to investors by 2026. That's despite declining global interest rates. Joining me now is the CFO of Standard Chartered, Diego De Giorgi, who joins me in the studio. Diego, thanks so much for your time. Congratulations. Decent beat from Standard Chartered. The return of cash to shareholders, the expectation you can get to $8 billion by 2026. That's up from a previous target of $5 billion. What gives you that confidence? And is there an expectation internally that maybe you could do more than $8 billion?
So we in fact have indicated at least 8 billion.
What does at least mean?
More than 8.
Okay.
So
double digits? Is that possible? Double digits on the buyback?
We'll see. It's a bit early for a 3-year plan to do that. We have returned $2.7 billion of capital to our shareholders between dividends and share buybacks this year so far. And what gives us that confidence is the strength of our business across all areas. It's a business that is firing on all cylinders. I mean, top line this quarter up 12%, bottom line up 30% year on year. That gem of a business that is our wealth management business up over 30% this quarter after having been up over 25% for 2 quarters in a row. 71,000 new to bank clients, 10 billion of net new money attracted to our wealth management business. That's what gives us the confidence to up not only our target of distributions from 5 to 8, but also our target for 2026 return on tangible equity from 12% to towards 13%. And in the short term, our target for revenue growth this year to towards 10%.
What is driving that growth in the wealth unit, and where do you see the opportunities as you push into 2025?
So very much a combination of secular trends in the markets and the nature of our clients. So clearly the growth of the middle class in the heartlands of Standard Chartered, Asia, Africa, the Middle East, is a phenomenon that is continuing to unfold. Estimates of $80 trillion of wealth in Asia by 2027. I mean, that's clearly a very powerful secular trend. From the point of view of our clients, we offer to our clients a very wide spectrum of products, and we cover our clients as they grow with us from their first savings all the way to the private bank. And it's graduating up in that continuum and being close to our clients across their cycle of life. That is the strength of the house.
How big could this business get for you in, say, the next 2 to 5 years?
Look, it's growing right now at the kind of rates that I told you. Those are not rates that you can sustain in the longer run. But we have already indicated that we think the historical rate of growth, which was high single digits, is clearly a thing of the past. We are now into the double digits, and that gives us confidence about the future.
And you talked about hiring potentially an increase in terms of wealth managers, relationship managers for the wealth unit, maybe trying to increase that by 50%. What does that mean in terms of numbers, in terms of additional headcount you're looking at?
So that is really at the heart of the sharpening of the focus on our wealth management business, which is a place where we have been winning already, as we have discussed, but where we can do a lot more. And so we're going to invest $1.5 billion over the next 3 years, which is a doubling of our existing internal plans. And we're going to invest in 3 things. We're going to invest in people, relationship managers.
How many?
We don't disclose the number of relationship managers we have for competitive reasons, but you can imagine 50% is on one hand obviously an important increase. It's also about 10% a year over 5 years. So it's something that we can do, and we offer relationship managers a very interesting proposition because our clients are very loyal to us. Our clients very often see us as either the only or one of the few international banks in the countries where we operate. And as a consequence, we have a very interesting proposition for these relationship managers.
Okay.
On top of that, we also invest in technology and products, which ought to help us attract more of them.
So that's on the investment side. Fit for growth, which is part of the program, which seems to be paying off right now for the bank. The cost cutting is expected to accelerate next year. Is that the right way to frame it? And where are those cuts going to come? We talked about the investment piece. Where are you going to be prioritising the reduction in costs for the bank next year?
So let me separate for a second cost management, which on an ongoing basis we do day in, day out. And you've seen in this quarter our costs grew by only 2%. So we're clearly good at controlling costs. But Fit for Growth is more than a cost program. Fit for Growth is not a cost program. It's a transformation program. It's a way of simplifying the way we do business, standardizing it, making not only easier to do business with the bank, but also easier to work at the bank for our people. So it's an investment in our people, it's an investment in the skills of the people. That is what Fit for Growth is. If you think about it, Fit for Growth is as much, of course, a program that will create efficiency as it is a program where we're going to
Can you give us some specifics on that for next year, though?
So we have guided that for this year we are going to be investing about 200 million in Fit for Growth, and next year we'll see the bulk of the investment with a tail in 2026.
Okay, talk to us about China. The constant question.
For this year we are going to be investing